call that radio. You call that radio TV. You call that radio TV.
We are here to tell the people that we hear you. One God will not allow us and people of conscience to lose our morale.
You call that radio.
Tucking on my heels and his hands. Bust up a ball collapse. A countdown and task. 5, 4, 3, 2.
Good afternoon, troubadours. It's You Call That Radio. It's Tuesday night. Tonight we are welcoming Claire Duffy onto the show, who's a writer, producer, author, does lots of stuff. Really came to my attention from the End series, which is an amazing piece of work. Sums up lockdown perfectly. And just loving this series. And I've been listening to podcasts that she's featured in. She's got an amazing story, very funny. Really excited to have her on the show. Just before we bring her on, I want to announce another legend we've got. Oh, it's not worked. I'll bring it on in a second. But we've got Lynn McDonald for the Soundhouse. You will remember the legendary nightclub. I think the Soundhouse appears on maybe 20% of the podcast we've done. Someone mentions the Soundhouse. So we've actually got Lynn, who is the driving force behind the Soundhouse. She will be on this show on Thursday night. She's an events organizer and a social activist as well, a political activist. She's amazing. And I'm looking forward to getting a blether with her on Thursday night. Tomorrow night, we have part 2 of That's What She Said, which you might have seen in part 1 last night. It was amazing, 4.5 hours of incredible female artists, producers, promoters, and part 2 is tomorrow night, so expect some live performances and more chat, hosted once again by Becky Wallace. I'll just be here making sure things run smoothly. That's a laugh, innit? So yeah, let's bring on Claire. Has everyone tuned in? Yeah, we've got Petra's tuned in. Hello, Petra. Hello, Alan. How you doing, mate? Evening, Mark. Sent you the ticket money for Saturday. Thank you very much, Paul. Thank you, everyone who's been donating to the show that we did on Saturday. It was a really special night. It was a bit emotional at times, but it was incredible. If you missed it, we just uploaded the Bomb Scare's first song from the night. It's now on YouTube, and every day at 3 o'clock, we'll drop a new song from that evening. I think it's a Twist It's Weird Me tomorrow, and we'll just do something every day at 3 o'clock just to give everyone a flavour of it. We still haven't figured out how to monetize what we did because it's a lot of work and it's expensive to create premium content. I hate that word, but that's what it is. It's premium content. So we just need to figure out how to do it. So I made everything private till we figure out how we're going to go forward and do more of those nights. But I love doing it, and I love the fact that yous loved us doing it. And it was great to see the smiles and the bands of Bomb Scare and Colonel Mustard and the Twistettes and Gordie Duncan Jr. and Rory O.B. and Callum Ingram and Victoria McNulty and Martin Windybank and the Capture Works crew, who all did an amazing job. So if it's up to me, I want to keep doing this like once a month at least, maybe even more, if we can just get the support. And because of people like you, Paul, and people donating and people becoming patrons, we've got 10 new patrons, and it makes me think we're going to do it. I think we can try it out again. So thank you for giving me faith in the project. We are building a thing. It's getting bigger all the time. So we need more and more people to support it in order to make it bigger. So just go to patreon.com/You Call That Radio. Even a couple of pounds a month really helps us create bigger and better things. So that's how to support the show. If you're watching this tonight on Facebook, then I'm sure that most of you are starting to realise, especially after Saturday, that it just looks better on YouTube. So Go to youtube.com/you call that radio. It'll look and sound better there. Hit the big red button, hit the notification bell. And we're also on Twitch, which is better than Twitch as well, which is twitch.tv/you call that radio. And if you have an Amazon Prime account, you can link them together. And big Jeff Bezos, who's about to get £1 trillion, he's going to need to write a check for £2.50 a month for every time you hit that subscribe button and link your Amazon Prime accounts. If you've done it before, you remember you need to do it every month. And we're about to take him. We're going to take him at the cleaners. I think he nearly owes us £100. As soon as we've got £100 worth of subscribers, he's got to write us a check for £100. Let's take him down that way. Right. Who else is tuned in? Evening. Yeah. Alan says, looking forward to listening to Lynn on Thursday. Absolutely. So am I. She's an absolute legend. Many a happy night spent at the Soundhouse. Absolutely. What a place it was. Raymond Dito, good evening for Perth family. Finally get a night where I can tune in live, pishing for the heavens. But a bit of You Call That Radio makes it better. Exactly. And we don't call it live anymore. We call it a lev. Shouts to Gary Robertson for inventing on Dundonian patter. He calls it a lev. So what did you hear, Mark? He's doing a lev last night. So that's Dundonian language for you. When are you going to do the Who Took Utopia show? I don't know. Probably when I get the new computer. I'm waiting on the new computer arriving. It was supposed to be here last week. Problems with parts. They say it will be here by Monday at the latest. So it depends how quickly I can get it set up. But with the computer, it just means I can get a better sound quality. Because the last time we tried to do one of those shows, it just wasn't. It didn't sound good enough for the sharing it off YouTube. So it's all right for sharing other things, but live music's not so good. Saturday was amazing. Well done, everybody. Well done, you, for watching and supporting Raymond Dito. Drop the full gyro set at 3 o'clock. Maybe I will. How about that, Captain? We've got Helen Duffy says, hi, Claire. Claire is not here yet. She will be here in a minute. Hi, babes. You're loud and proud. Bra, babes. Love, baby doll. Thank you, Sugar Cube. Liking the shirt, Mar. Do you like it? No bad time. Glad to do whatever I can to help you in building a hing. Thank you, Joe. You are one of the top builders of this hing we're building. Even though watching on Facebook for the auto captions. Well, that is true. Facebook does have auto captions if you want what I say to look even more foolish than it actually is. But I think it's time to bring on our first guest. Our first guest is our only guest. See, this is because of last night having about 50 guests in one show. Let's all give a round of applause. I don't know if you've seen the end series before, but it's amazing. Incredible writer. It's CS Duffy, Claire Duffy. Let's bring her on.
Brothers and sisters, may the peace that can only come from the one God be upon you. We are here to tell the people that we hear you. One God will not allow us as people of conscience to lose our morale.
Powered by our patrons. We are indeed powered by our patrons. Thank you to everyone supporting the hing. Claire Duffy, can you hear me?
I can indeed. Hello.
Hello. Thank you very much for taking the time to speak to us here on You Call That Radio. It's a pleasure to have you on here. We've not had we've not had enough filmmakers and we've not had enough writers. It gets quite music-centric here just because of my background, but I'm a massive fan of film and comedy. And, I'm just new to all your stuff, so I'm looking forward to reading your books properly and getting more into what you're doing. But I had to invite you on because I just loved the end series. I just caught an episode and it blew me away. Because obviously, as you can probably see here, we have to do everything on a very low budget. And my whole career has been DIY with no budget. And what I love when I see stuff like the end is that it just reminds me, stop complaining just go and do a thing. You don't need. It'd be nice to have a big budget, but you don't need to have a big budget. So, what was the thinking behind it all?
Honestly, that was totally it. Can I just say quickly, that was my mum saying hello just there. So, hi, mum. Thank you.
Hello, Claire's mum.
Somebody's watching anyway. Yeah, that was like 100% the whole thinking behind the end, that we were going to do something that was just so tiny. Like most of the episodes have been literally just one actor with a camera phone, and the whole idea was we didn't have to get, anybody's permission. We didn't have to get anybody's approval. We didn't, have to compromise what we felt like doing at all. It's just something that's this kind of pure little burst of creativity, and also something we can do right now, because as I say, if you've just got one actor and a camera phone, that's perfectly socially distanced and all of that. So yeah, that was totally the thinking behind it, was just to, rather than sit around moaning about not getting given budgets and commissions and all the rest of it, why not just do something, and then we can show what we can do.
Absolutely. And it just, what I love about it is because it's almost like a reflection on, for me, it just stood out because obviously this is what my life is like every day anyway. Shaky footage, talking to someone, and I just loved the whole concept of it. And can you explain a wee bit about the concept behind it and the fact that it gets passed on?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that was really kind of like the first bit of it that really came to me, just this idea of creating something that, that wasn't just going to be like totally controlled by me, but was going to be something that could be a sort of network of people, working together and bouncing ideas off together. Because I think that when you're, when you're working in the film industry, it's such a collaborative thing. But then when you're not getting to do the job enough, you're sort of out there by yourself trying to practice for a job that is ultimately collaborative, and there's no real way to kind of get used to that. So I thought, what can I do that's something that will include other people, but then I can still get to do, the bits of it that I want to. And then I just thought of, I don't know if you remember, there was a game that, like, I think I used to play it when we were, camping when I was a kid, or, long car drives or something, where somebody would start off a story and then be like, and then the door opened and you would like pass it on to the next person to pick it up, and inevitably, like, my wee brother would be like, and they all died, and we'd all be like, that's not helpful. But anyway, so like he would always have his things he threw in, and my sister would be like, and everybody had unicorns and ponies, and it was all wonderful. So I thought, why couldn't you do that? So that's sort of how it worked, that I came up with this basic mad idea. I don't even write sci-fi normally, but just this thought came to me. So basically, the basic kind of concept of it is that somebody has invented like a life support machine, but for the brain. I was just thinking about the fact, I think I was watching, I don't know, ER or something, and somebody had been put on life support where machines can obviously make your your lungs go and your heart go, but once your brain's gone, that's you're dead. So I just had this thought, what if they could invent something that would artificially keep your brain going, so you'd still be able to walk and talk and live your life, but it'd be a computer, it would be a machine making you go. So would you still be yourself? And so I was just starting to kind of like turn over that thought in my head, and that's when I thought, it's a perfect kind of setting to turn out to loads of people, because there's so many different aspects to it. So some people have been focusing quite on the sci-fi aspects, and how would we manage a society where there's dead people walking about. Some people have gone really kind of emotional and into the psychological aspects. So that's basically how it started. I came up with this basic idea. I wrote 3 episodes, which were just the first 3 characters that occurred to me, and the first 3 I guess aspects of the concept that I wanted to explore. I was so lucky. I just messaged on Twitter these 3 brilliant actresses that I had just seen on telly and thought were absolutely fantastic. They didn't know me, and I was just like, hello, hope you don't think I'm a total stalker, but I've just written this scene for you. Is there any way you would like to do it? And I was so lucky. Every one of them said yes. So we got to do these 3 brilliant episodes, just literally me chatting to them on Zoom a little bit, and then they recorded themselves with their phones. And then each of us then nominated the next lot of filmmakers to just pick up the story and take it on to whatever they want to do with it. So they only realize that they're not allowed to like, well, they're not allowed to do what my brother did basically and just kill off the story. They, you know, they can't sort of deny anything we've said or anything like that, but they can add in new characters. They can write stuff for our characters. They can bring in, you know, new actors that work for it with ours. They can do absolutely anything. So the first 3 episodes from nominated people have just come in over the last couple of weeks, and what's so thrilling about them is that they fit so perfectly and beautifully into the whole, you know, concept, and they're brilliant. And I would have never written them. So my brain wouldn't have thought of those ideas at all. So it's kind of exactly what I hoped for, that the idea would sort of spark ideas in other people's brains, that it makes it so much better than if I'd just written it all by myself, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I think what we maybe do is just to give the audience here that are tuned in, maybe they might not be aware of it, just a little flavour of it. Would it make sense to just start at the start? That's why I did it.
Yeah, I think so. That's probably the first one I wrote, and the first one we shot as well, in the pouring rain at Glasgow Uni, hiding under the cloisters because it was the only place that we weren't get soaked.
Amazing stuff. And who's the actress in this one?
Her name is Kim Allen. She's absolutely fantastic. She's brilliant in the scene.
Okay, let's check out, guys. Let us know in the comments what you make of this. I'm loving these.
I was walking my mum's dog. She had tried to fight a bee and fell off the campsies and broke her leg. Standard, my mother, for what it's worth. And despite the fact that I have a relatively demanding life, I was expected to walk the bloody thing every day. I've got 2 brothers, by the way, but one of them had just been dumped by his bird, and the other one, well, he's been in a deep and committed relationship with his video games for the past decade, so clearly neither of them could be expected to bother their arses. Look, I'm not saying, obviously, she's my mum, and I'd do anything to help, but the thing is, I don't even like dogs. I'm not a monster. I don't wish them any harm or anything, so don't start sending me hate mail, but at least not about that anyway. I just find them a bit needy, emotionally. Sue me. Anyway, I was walking this wee furry arsehole of my mother's, and we cut through the cemetery to get down to the canal path. The strange thing is that I never walk through cemeteries. I don't like them. Well, some people do. My mum, she does. She loves walking through the old ones, reading the names on the graves, wondering what their lives were like. She even finds it romantic when couples are buried together. Your Hamish Mick Flibbery Flips and his dear wife Ethel, 1862 to 1903, trapped together in the earth forever and ever. All I see is endings. I don't consciously remember deciding to take a shortcut. I mean, I was in no particular hurry. I just walked through the cemetery that day just because. And then I saw this woman. She was lying across one of the graves, a freshly dug one, right in the mud itself. I mean, she must have been filthy. There's not many new graves in that cemetery. You know, it's mostly your Hamishes and Ethels dying of smallpox before 40 after years of toil in the fields and endless pregnancies, respectively. But this one had a spanking new stone, and there were flowers, a sea of them, all different colours. And this woman, she was lying across them. And she was howling, not crying, not shedding a wee tear, howling like an animal caught in a trap. This wrenching, strangled sound coming from deep in her gut, and I could feel it. I could feel it tearing through me, vibrating against my bones. Stood there for ages, just watching her. The dog started whining and pissed all over another grave, but I just couldn't take my eyes off her. That's why I did it. Just so you know, all of you out there who've been tormenting me, judging me, condemning me, the police have all your details, by the way. Just so you know, that's why I did it. Because of that woman. To stop anybody ever again howling like she did that day. You still think I'm a monster?
How do we educate our children to take their place in the economies of the 21st century? How do we do that, given that we can't anticipate what the economy will look like at the end of next week? Every country on Earth is trying to figure out how do we educate our children so they have a sense of cultural identity and so that we can pass on the cultural genes of our communities while being part of the process of globalization. How do we square that circle?
You call that radio?
Makes coherent sense.
Amazing stuff, Claire. We've got Raymond Dito says, "Wow, powerful."
Oh, thank you. Brilliant.
If you're on Facebook, hit the wow reacts right now. Lou23 says, "What an amazing actress and fantastic writing. Particularly like vibrating my bones. Where can I see more of this? Outstanding."
Fantastic. It's always great to hear. And yeah, it's all on YouTube at the moment. Or we've got a Twitter that's The End the Series, just to make life complicated. And so I've linked all of the episodes there. And I think we've got 6 up at the moment, and there's loads more to come. I'm working on a couple, and there's a few other just amazing other Scottish filmmakers that are working on stuff. So I think we're going to have like an influx of about 10 in a couple of weeks, which is super exciting.
Hi Claire, looking good, says Helen.
That's Mum again. Hi, thanks very much.
Hi Mum. Raymond Dito has just signed back up in the Patreon. Amazing stuff, Raymond. Thank you very much. Actually, can I just do a quick shout out to the new patrons, which is Raymond, Lindsay, Davey, Mandy, Jenny, Jill, and Jill. And there's actually probably a couple more that signed up since Saturday. Thank you so much. Patreon.com/you call that radio if you want to help us build the thing. And what else we got? Margaret is watching you, says Margaret.
Oh, that's my grandma.
Oh, yes. Hi, Grandma. We've got Ryan Duffy in the house.
Oh. Yeah, that would be the wee brother who
that ruins it. He ruins it. And they all died.
Yep. Oh, well, the family's out supporting and enforced anyway.
Good to see the support. Henry Morgan Jr., I think that's a mutual friend of ours.
Yes. Hello, Harry.
Harry is an absolute legend. He was on the show a couple of weeks ago.
He is. I was watching. It was fantastic.
Alan Rorison says, "Loved that." Petra Jolly says, "Ooh, I was sucked right into that." Joe McCann says, "Hard hitting." And yeah, what a great way to start the show. So how does your writing process change when you're kind of aware that the story, are you deliberately trying to leave a lot of things open? Because I would imagine that if when you're actually writing your own story, you've probably got a good plan of what's going to happen.
You do to a certain extent. It really depends because I write for film, telly, and my own books, and they're all a little bit different. Obviously, my books I can sort of, control the most because it's just me writing a story that goes directly to my readers. And when I'm writing scripts, I'm always thinking a little bit about, even outside the story, just I guess leaving a little bit of room for the actor to come in because, when they come in and just take the character to like a whole other level, it's just, as you just saw there, it just makes it so fantastic. And with this, I guess, at the moment, I think I'm just really writing whatever I want to see happen in this series. I've not really been thinking too consciously about giving people stuff to bounce off because I'm seeing that's already happening like quite naturally that, pretty much anything that we put out there that's giving people ideas, they're then starting to create. We've got a few storylines that are happening and so on. So I think what's a little bit different about this, and that's a real kind of treat as a screenwriter, is knowing that we're getting to shoot it almost immediately. So I'm writing it with the actor in mind, whereas usually when I work with production companies, the casting and so on, it's so far down the line that I'm writing for actors that I don't know who they are yet. So this is amazing because I know that when I write an episode, it'll be online within 3 or 4 days. And that makes it really exciting and slightly terrifying also. But that's always good.
Yeah, well, that's, I suppose, it's going to be a little bit uncomfortable and you're wanting to get outside your comfort zone as a writer.
Absolutely. I think that's what's so important. And it's something that, like in some ways, I think I was quite lucky because I started working in theatre before. I think I probably always wanted to be a writer, but I didn't quite admit it until I was sort of in my mid-20s, so a few years into my career. So I had been working in theatre in London for like 3 or 4 years at the time. And, I'd been sitting in rehearsals and I'd been seeing how like the kind of questions that actors write about scripts, ask about scripts, and even seen, what audiences sometimes react is things that none of us were expecting when we wrote it or we rehearsed it or whatever it is. So in a lot of ways, I've been really lucky because I started writing already being really aware that it was going to have to go, out there, or I guess or not, but then it would just sort of, sit in a drawer in my bedroom or something. But I think, that's one of the most terrifying things as a writer, to just kind of go, right, I've done my best and now I've got to put it out there and sort of, what the audience will think. You can't predict what people are going to, connect to or go off or hate. You can't predict what, I've had actors sometimes pick up a character and make it nothing like what was in my head at all. Luckily, often much, much better. But that's a part of it's terrifying, but it's also just like the most thrilling thing as well, thinking I just made that up in my head and now I don't even recognize it. It's takes a bit getting used to, but it is fantastic when it happens.
So what was your first, we'll use the word success, I'm not saying that, I'm sure you're probably going to be humble and go, oh, I wasn't very successful, but what was the first thing you wrote that became something that came out of your head that you seen get played out in reality?
That was actually probably my books. I worked as a screenwriter for, more years than I really care to admit without really getting anywhere. And I think one of the most frustrating, well, there's a lot of frustrating things about being a failing screenwriter, but one of them is that because a screenplay sort of isn't really a thing in and of itself, it's like a blueprint in a way for a thing to be made. So if the thing never gets made, you just feel like you're sort of pouring your heart and soul into, stories and like falling in love with characters and thinking up, what you imagine is really clever dialogue. And then it falls at the last hurdle, for production, and it just never happens. And it just it's like it just sort of evaporates in a way. And I got to a point that I was just like, I can't take that anymore. Like I felt like I was bashing my head against a brick wall a little bit. And so I quit quite spectacularly. I was living in Stockholm at the time, and I got a project that was sort of it was cancelled, and they said, oh well, send us another one, and I was like, no, I'm done. And I threw a total diva tantrum, and I then proceeded to cycle past this production company for like the next year, and I would give it the finger as I went by. And then about like the following summer, I found out that that production company had moved offices, and I'd just been flipping off these random architects for like months and months, which is such a great metaphor, I think, for how much power creative people have in the industry. But anyway, I started working this mad day job where I worked in a daycare in Stockholm. And I just, when my class, because I had a class of 1-year-olds, and when they had their afternoon nap, I started writing this blog. And I didn't really mean for it to be anything in particular. It was just a writing exercise. It was just a way that I just wanted to get a story out there into the world, you know, that wouldn't sort of, there'd be no barrier between me and people getting to read it. So I wrote this mad blog from the perspective of a character in one of my screenplays. So it was this American woman who'd moved to Sweden for this, you know, gorgeous Swedish guy that she'd met on holiday. And after she'd been there for just a couple of weeks, and she was starting to realize that maybe she didn't know him quite as well as she thought she did, one of his best friends gets murdered, and the police are clearly circling him. And so she's sort of torn between being like, you know, the loyal girlfriend trying to stand by him, and also realizing, hold on a minute, what if I've moved here for a murderer? So that was a great thing to blog about. So I started writing this blog, and it took off in like a toty tiny little way. You know, like by proper blog standards, there was like a few thousand people reading it, but they read every day. Like I put a little chapter up every single day, and they would comment and they would get right into the mystery. And loads of them to begin with thought she was real, and I felt awful about that because when they found out she wasn't, I was getting all these like really angry emails of people being like, I've been so worried about her. I was going to take her for coffee and like make sure she was okay living with this awful guy.
That means you've done your job as a writer, though.
Well, exactly. I think I had to really, you know, come to terms with the fact that writers aren't very nice people, because of course half of me was like, oh, I never meant to hurt anybody. But then on the other hand, you really believed in her that much and you cared about her that much. It was kind of amazing. So it was honestly, I got to the end of that, and it was actually one of the readers emailed me and said, is there any way you could put this together in like one file so I can read it on my Kindle? Because obviously I'd been like doing a chapter every day for about 6 months at this point. And I Googled put book on Kindle, and I discovered this whole world of self-publishing where you can just do literally that. You can put a book up on Amazon. Anybody can, like tomorrow. But it's now turned into this whole industry where people are getting, you know, really like professional editing and covers and all that kind of thing, and doing really, really well. So I kind of stumbled into that, and that was when I wrote the Dark of Night books. They're probably, my biggest success. If it's always terrifying a little bit saying that word, but yeah, they seem to be doing quite well, and it's just been absolutely fantastic, you know, hearing from people who are really enjoying them, and so yeah, that's them.
Brilliant. I've got some comments coming in. Alan's asked what the YouTube channel is. If you're watching this on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitch, I've put the link to the YouTube channel, so please hit that red button and check them out. There's 6 episodes, but like Claire just said, there's another 10 on the way. Sandra says, amazing. Claire just said that she's going into schools because she would inspire the young people of Scotland so much. We need creative people like her speaking to our young people. We certainly do.
Absolutely.
There's no, I can't think of one inspiring person that came to my school. Coraline McSill, brilliant stuff. CS Duffy, loving your work. What a brilliant idea.
Thank you.
Katie says, Claire is a total inspo. And Angela says, that's great. Left me thinking what she did.
Fantastic.
Claire is so impressive. Love your work. We'll be hearing more of you in the near future. So with these, does each show, is that almost like a small chapter? Is that how you're writing it? So you're wanting each episode to have a little bit of a cliffhanger, and that also leaves it open for the new people coming in to get tore into it?
Exactly, more or less. So I did, I thought a little bit about how, you know, people will come across this, because not everybody's, you know, usually you go to YouTube because you're looking for something specific. So I think a lot of people just stumble across it, comes by their Twitter feed or whatever it is. And of course, we're just at the very, very beginning of you know, starting to build an audience. So I wanted it to be something that wouldn't be too frustrating if you found episode 6. So most of them, they're somewhat self-contained, like you can almost call it just like a little, I don't know, moment in these characters' lives. But then the idea is that the more we get in, the more characters that we start to build, kind of storylines that continue on will start to sort of emerge, where they're all sort of bouncing off each other. And I think I'll figure out how, once that starts to happen, whether I'll put it into separate playlists or something, so that you'll know, right, here's 5 you went to marathon together, or whatever it is. So at the moment, part of the idea is that, yeah, you could come in anywhere, and if any of them sort of intrigue you and you like the character, then there's all sorts of other characters that you can start to get to know. But in some ways, it was a lot about taking that same mentality that I love about indie publishing. So like everything that I learned about that blog, I loved just taking, I guess, my story, my creativity, whatever you want to call it, like direct to audience, rather than I mean, I don't want to totally criticize, the film industry, obviously, because it's where I earn my living, but there's an awful lot of, obviously there's gatekeeping, and there's sometimes people are choosing projects with an agenda. Sounds like a really negative word. I don't want it to be that negative, but there's certain things that there's boxes they have to tick for the scripts that they're commissioning and the things they're putting onto like the main channels that aren't necessarily always entirely just about the creativity. So so that was kind of partly what I wanted to do, was take that really indie publishing mentality that's all about, I'm just going to write my story and I'm going to put it up there, on Amazon, most people do, or wherever it is. And if people out there want to read it, like there's just such a kind of a purity to that. So that was the kind of mentality that I wanted to try and apply to this, that there's not ever going to be any like, I don't know, big stars necessarily, or big, marketing campaigns or whatever it is. It's just if somebody stumbles across it and they think, oh, I want to know more about this character, I want to know more about this world, then hopefully it'll draw them in.
But that is art in its purest form, and I mean, it happens, with bands who have a bit of art that they've created, and they have a vision for it, and then it gets stamped on by record producers, and maybe people wanting to say certain things and appear a certain way, and it does dilute a lot of that. And it's a shame, because the reason that these people are in gatekeeper positions or whatever is they've obviously proved themselves at some level to be good at what they do. But as for me personally, I think it's just a case of too many cooks spoil the broth, and sometimes they're just getting in the way of things to justify their wage, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think so, and I think that totally happens. In the film and TV industry as well. And it's as I say, it's not like a black and white, good and bad. Of course, there are some things that are also made better by certain production companies or producers getting behind it and so on. I think it doesn't have to be either or, in the same way that, like with publishing, there are some books that are right for your big, publishing houses and to go into, Richard and Judy's book club or whatever it is. And there are some stories that just aren't right for that arena, and they should just go, on a kind of smaller level. Like, for example, like my books, for example, I think kind of sum up in some ways because they've done really well with like a really, really local Glasgow audience, partly because they're set all over the city. They're all set in places that, are like meaningful to me and my family. It's a little bit of a weird Duffy tour of Glasgow. So I think they've really resonated with people who know the characters so well and know those types of people and know the places. But there's no massive publisher that's going to take a book on knowing that they can only sell it to the people in Glasgow. So I think it doesn't have to be either or. I think there should be space for both, and that's in some ways what I'm hoping to try and create with this. That the end is never going to like replace the big new series on the BBC, but I don't think people need to watch one or the other. I think they can watch both, or whichever one they prefer, and they can make it should go out to the people that are watching. They can decide what they want to see.
Absolutely. There's, I mean, when you think about it, it is quite an exciting time, when the fact that, when you were doing the blog, being able to just write something on a day-to-day basis and then hitting an audience immediately. This is all really, really new. There was no way that you could even dream of this happening, even going back as far as, the early 21st century.
Absolutely. It's such potentially, I think, an amazing time for creators. And it's a little bit of a strange thing to say, but I even think that, even all the events of the last couple of months, as much as it's been a massive blow, of course, it's been a massive blow to every industry, but, the creative industry is no less. But sometimes really good creativity comes out of really difficult circumstances. And so, like with the end, part of my whole thinking with this is that, okay, what's something that we could be doing right now? It's filling in like a little bit of like a space that just didn't even exist 6 months ago, because a lot of the big shows have had to stop shooting. So I think so much of it is about taking advantage of the technology as it comes out. I mean, I tried to do web series like 10, 20 years ago, and I'd like to think I was ahead of my time, but probably I was just not quite technical enough to figure out what might have been out there at the time. But yeah, it's just absolutely incredible to think that I can, I was directing one of the episodes over Zoom, and then I would just mute myself and then record. Both of the actors like screen recorded themselves, and then I edited it. And we were in totally different flats, so just to think that we can do that is just, I think it's really exciting in a lot of ways.
Absolutely. And you're saying, obviously, there's all these, it's all set in Glasgow, so it's parts of Glasgow that mean a lot to you. But I know that from your background, I've heard, I've been trying to just catch up with what your career, I don't know a lot about it, but I've been trying to research it and stuff. But I've heard you talk about Vancouver, growing up in Vancouver, living in Sweden. Where have you been? What's been happening?
Well, basically, it was when I was 8, my dad got a job in France. And so we moved there and then to the States, which is again just his job transferred him there. So I think maybe because I sort of grew up that way, just moving around, and then we ended up just south of London, which is where most of my family all live now. When I sort of grew up myself, it just seemed so natural to me to write. I'm bored of London. I worked in theatre in London for a couple of years, and then I just kind of got itchy feet, and so I applied to film school in Vancouver, and just kind of got on a plane and went, and ended up living there for nearly 3 years, because I did the film school course. And then Canada does this brilliant visa where if you study in a particular industry, I'm not sure if it exists anymore, but it did then, they'll let you continue your education by sort of doing work experience for a year afterwards. So that was fantastic, because I got to work on a couple of like the sets of like big American shows. I mean, just like the absolute lowest of the low, making tea, directing traffic and stuff. And then I ended up back in London for a couple of years, and that was when I sort of started screenwriting a little bit more seriously. And then, I just kind of got bored again, and I just felt like I was sort of, I don't know, treading water in life, and I think I get bored easily. And I was reading The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, which was like massive at the time. This was like 2011. And this idea just popped into my head. What if I just went and lived in Sweden? And once it had popped in, I couldn't think of a reason not to go. So I just got a one-way ticket, and off I went. And I'll never forget, actually, my mum and my sister took me to the airport. And as I was saying bye-bye to them, my sister went, "I didn't think you were serious about this." And I'm like, I don't even know if I was. So I just kind of thought, well, what's the worst that can happen? I'd go for 6 months and be like, what's this? Remember that crazy 6 months I lived in Stockholm once upon a time? And I ended up staying there for 6 years. And then I got itchy feet again. And I thought, I'm going to try Glasgow. So so I moved to Glasgow, and then I got itchy feet again. And now I sort of live, right at the moment I'm here, but for the last sort of year or so, I've been living sort of half and half in between Stockholm and Glasgow, which is just the most, I think it just makes the perfect life. Put the two together. They're both pretty close to perfect already, but the two together is as good as it gets.
That's actually a goal of mine to
Oh,
one
really?
day. Yeah, I think one day it would be good to live somewhere a bit warmer in the winter and just work on music, writing, and then come back in the summer and do the festival circuit and promote the thing.
Oh, yeah.
And just do it and just catch up with everyone. Because I don't think there's anywhere more beautiful in Scotland in the summer. And I love festival season, obviously, apart from this year. It's not been, it's been a non-event. But yeah, and also I've been to Sweden once. We went for a weekend to, I can't remember the name of the place, but it was kind of near Helsingborg.
Harrison, yeah, down in the
Harrison Bourne.
south.
So, because I remember that because Henrik Larsson's played there.
I was
so
just going to say that's where he comes from.
So I noticed that we were 30 miles away from there, and we drove for another 10 minutes that way, and we were on the beach. But it was just I didn't see lots of Sweden because we were only there we're just staying in a house for the weekend, and then we had a few hours in Denmark on the way back. But I can totally see why you'd want to live there. It's a lovely place, and the people are amazing.
They really are. They're absolutely fantastic. It's Stockholm I live, which is a good bit further north. So the one bit that I've not quite got right about this like amazing double life is that I've forgotten to include anywhere that actually gets a summer. So I go from 10 feet of snow in Stockholm to 10 feet of rain in Glasgow. So yeah, I should maybe, it was actually my sister-in-law's Brazilian, and she was like, why would you not go somewhere with sun? And I'm like, that, yeah, now you mention that, I really should have thought of that.
Yeah, well, I think that's it. My goal is to definitely have maybe not pure sunshine, but just a wee bit better than a Scottish winter. I think that would be ideal. Now, just also, I listened to a podcast last night that you did, and you were talking about. I've not listened to any episodes yet, but I thought it was an amazing concept because when I've been wanting to do a podcast for years, but people are always saying, we're talking about this other night actually with Dean Wallace when he was on the show. People are like, you need to find a niche or whatever. And I didn't really fancy just sticking to one thing or finding something that was, because I've got a low concentration span, so sticking to one thing would be a problem for me. But you had an amazing concept, and I think a lot of the viewers would love to hear about it. So it's Women of the Hollywood Land, and first of all, Hollywood Land, I didn't know that about the sign. So if you want to give us a bit of background on that, that'd be amazing.
Oh yeah, that's one of my favorite stories actually. So the original Hollywood sign that was put up in, I think it was 1924, by a producer called Max Sennett. Have you ever heard of the Keystone Cops? That was kind of he sort of started the first comedy studio in 1908, I think, in Culver City. And so he discovered Chaplin, he discovered Mabel Normand, and Laurel and Hardy. I think they worked at Keystone to start with. So he bought this plot of land in the Hollywood Hills, and just pure to like show off how kind of rich he was, basically, he just decided to erect this sign that said Hollywood Land. And then the Wall Street crash hit about 6 years later, and he lost all his money, and so he never got to build on the land. And so the sign is still there, and the land fell off in the 50s, I think. So it became the Hollywood Stand. But yeah, it used to be Hollywood Land.
Wow, never knew that. You think you would know that? You think it would be common knowledge, but I'd never heard that before. And so the podcast you do is aimed predominantly at the women of Hollywood Land. Now, are you focusing on famous women, or are you focusing on more women who maybe don't get enough credit or for what they did?
Well, a little bit of both, except that I don't think any of the women of that period get the credit that they deserve. So probably, all of them. So this is a real passion subject of mine, and honestly, we'll be here to midnight if I really get going. So I'll try and keep it reasonably brief. So basically, in the really, really early years of Hollywood, so I'm talking before the 20s, it was 1908 was the first year that the first studio started moving from New York. So New York is where the American film industry started. From 1908, they started, they basically followed the sun pretty much. They could shoot for a lot longer because also they didn't have electric lights in those days, so they needed the sun. And there was also a whole big thing with patents and so on. So that was when Hollywood started. And for a good 20 years, the industry was actually dominated by women. Up until 1925, an average of 50% of Hollywood releases were written by women. The last, I think it's 2017 is the last year that we've got stats for, and it was 11%. So it's actually got significantly worse in the past century or so. And so it's something I'm really passionate about because, of course, in the last couple of years when, there's been all this talk about, obviously, Me Too and Weinstein and, not enough opportunities for women in the industry. And all of the conversation about it has sort of started from this assumption, this myth that Hollywood has just always been this boys' club and we need to change it. Whereas I think we actually need to get back to how it was originally when, there was like the very first studio head was a woman. The person who invented the idea of like distribution, which is basically when you make a film and you want to get it into cinemas, that's called distribution. That was Mary Pickford, who was known as like America's sweetheart, and she was also the first one of the first film stars. All the big stars in those days were all women. Guys were like the love interest that would just be cowboys and fall off horses conveniently now and then. So it was just this really fascinating period where, yeah, you had these really, really powerful women. Rudolph Valentino, most people have heard of him as like the original sort of heartthrob Latin lover. He was discovered by a screenwriter and producer called June Mathis, who was just this fascinating woman who also wrote and produced the very original Ben-Hur, which was produced in 1925. So it's this really, really fascinating period that I think is just so important that we understand better, because really often these days, when we talk about, trying to get more women into the industry and, get more scripts by women and more, female directors out there, the whole conversation is so often framed as it's a question of fairness, like, oh, we need to give the girls a chance kind of thing, which is fine to a point. But my point is that actually the whole artistry of cinema was created by these early women. The first split screen was a female director. The first close-up was a female director. Like, women actually, created so much of this industry. And now we're kind of 100 years later going, oh, we should probably give women a chance to try and do something. So that was my whole idea with the podcast, which is not running at the moment, but it's so on my to-do list to try and do another season at some point, because yeah, obviously I've got an awful lot to say about the subject. It was just, so I did an episode on each of these female filmmakers that I think some people have maybe heard of Mary Pickford, because she started United Artists, which is still a studio today. I think obviously some people have heard of. I did one on Greta Garbo and one on Mabel Normand, who a lot of people have heard of because of the musical Mac and Mabel. But she also meant there would be no Chaplin if it wasn't for Mabel Normand. He was going to get fired because he was so rubbish on his first couple of films. And she was like, I really think he's got that daffy English guy. He's got something. I think we should keep him. And now we have Charlie Chaplin only because of Mabel Normand.
Interesting that you said that most people will have heard of Mary Pickford. Petra Jolly says, I lived in Mary Pickford's old house.
You did know? That's amazing.
It was apartments in my day, though.
Oh, it would be. It must be apps. I don't know if that's Pick Fair, which she built with her husband Douglas Fairbanks, or maybe there was an earlier house that she lived in. But yeah, it would be gigantic, I would imagine. Proper
and, Laura Starbucks says, love your work, Claire.
Thank you, Laura.
What I think we're going to do is we're going to play one more. Well, we're going to play, I think we're all going to play 3 episodes of The End all together, because they're only short, so I think it's great. And it means that people are going to get halfway through what's available just now. So the next one on the list is, hold on, He Saw It. Mm-hmm. So could you tell us a little bit about the actress involved here and what happened, how it was like to do this? And also, did you do one at a time, edit it, then do it, or was it all sort of at exact? Were you doing everything at the same time?
So these first 3 I sort of did roughly at the same time. Because there were the first 3 that I sort of came. So this one I didn't really direct. Kirsty did this pretty much herself. So it's an absolute amazing actress called Kirsty Strain, who I think is mostly well known for Burniston. So that's where I had first seen her. I got totally addicted to it during lockdown. I was just like, I can't watch any serious dramas while I'm like locked in my flat by myself. So I just watched, I think, every single episode of Burniston that was ever made. And I just thought, I think all the actors on it are absolutely fantastic. And when this character popped into my head, I instantly thought of Kirsty. And actually, she was the very first, even though Kim's episode we ended up making first, it was Kirsty that I messaged first, because I thought of her instantly for this character. And I just messaged her out the blue and was like, I'm a really big fan, and I think you'd be brilliant for this. Is there any chance you'd want to read it? And she said yes, because she's fantastic. And then she actually did the whole thing herself. I just I sent her the script, and then we had a little bit of a chat on Zoom, because this was like sort of in deep lockdown, when we couldn't have even met if we'd wanted to. So we had a little bit of a chat about sort of what I thought was important about the character and about the scene, and then she just sent it to me like a week later, and honestly, I had absolute goosebumps. I was just like, I can't believe I wrote this. It's so good.
Brilliant stuff. Well, let's check it out. So this is Kirsty Strain, and this is He Saw It, and this is part 2 of the end series, which I've put a link in the comments for the YouTube. Oh, then I'll put it back to the start.
This is DC Gillian Carruthers. It's Sunday, 19th of July 2020. It's 9:07 p.m. We've been on for a couple of hours. Been pretty quiet so far. It was a Wednesday. It was raining. But we get called to Govan Road. It was just by the underground station. Some old guy had been hassling some lassies who were waiting on a bus. Time we got there, he'd wandered off and they were fine. Said he'd been asking for cigarettes, and one of them had started lecturing him on the dangers of smoking. So our granny had one of the voice box thingies. Well, he hadn't taken to unsolicited health advice too well, and had got a bit aggressive, but like I said, it'd all blown over by the time we got there. So we were just getting back into the car, discussing whether or not we were far enough into the shift to stop for rolls, when Alex, that's my partner, DC Alex Monroe. We've only just been assigned to each other, but we grew up together. I've known him forever. Well, Alex, he spotted her. And he do you know my first kiss was with his big brother? I've forgotten his name. What is it now? It's Colin, Callum, something like that. Oh God, that's terrible. It was the summer holidays. Mind like how that when that was a big thing, like when you were allowed to go back out after tea to play again, because it was still light. And there was a load of us hanging about this play park in the middle of our estate, just hanging about in the swings and things, like you did in those days. I was with my pal Jane, and Colin or Callum or whoever he was. Well, he came over and he took me into the climbing frame. God, you know what I've never said that out loud before. I've just never realised how daft it sounds. But we had in this climbing frame, and well, he went in for a winch, and I didn't know what to do, so I just kept my mouth closed. And then he asked if we could French kiss. And I thought he meant, what the French do, like one on each cheek, which I thought was a bit of a step backwards for lips, if I'm honest, but I didn't understand, boys. Still don't. So, long story short, I turned to kiss him in the cheek and he ended up licking me in the ear. Jen still cast it up to me that later that night I asked Jen if I still licked his ear. I don't even think Alex was there that night, so it's nothing really. It's just funny, isn't it? things your mind comes up with. Random memories that you've not thought about in years. Can they remember? I mean, do we even know that? See, look, what is crucial that you understand here is that everything happened according to procedure. We used lawful force according to the circumstances. And I will stand by that. I will stand by Alex until my die. Assuming I'm allowed to die. Now, there should be some sort of declaration. I should be able to swear on the Bible or something that I don't want. Because I know that if I got hit by a bus next week or something, my mum and dad would... And I won't. No, I'll tell them. After tonight. Because I mean, she was still talking. The whole time. Right up until her head. No, I'd rather be in the ground and become one of those things.
Brothers and sisters.
That's you, Daniel. Are you before me?
You call that radio?
Hello, yes, this is Dog.
Wonderful stuff there from Claire Duffy. Well done, Kirsty Strain as well. That's incredible performance.
Oh, yeah, absolutely amazing. I'll never forget actually seeing that for the first time and thinking, I didn't write that, surely. That's amazing. Not least, I think, because, you know, as I say, I had mostly known her from comedy. And so I think that was maybe something in me. I kind of wanted to give her something really, really the absolute opposite. And yeah, she just totally knocked it out of the park. So I think with so many of these episodes at this point, I'm like a kid in a sweetie shop, like just... I've got this sort of hit list of actors that I've just been noticing and stuff over the years that I've just always thought were absolutely brilliant. And yeah, now I think probably all the actors in Glasgow are going to start hiding when they see me coming quite soon.
Yo, I heard you saying in the podcast that you're in awe of actors. Is it something that you just never fancied doing yourself, or have you tried it and you just didn't think it was right, or?
Oh, I'm horrific at it. I mean, I'd never really particularly set out to be an actor. I think I've just always, in my head, I've just always wanted to sort of direct and be backstage. I mean, I did like little, you know, plays and bits and pieces when I was a kid. I was in like a sort of youth theatre as a teenager. But yeah, I studied a little bit of acting because I knew I wanted to direct, but you can't really study to direct exactly. Certainly not for theatre. You normally sort of study acting. So yeah, I have a year of drama school to prove what an absolutely horrific actor I am. So yeah, it was not really in question.
Are you actually just being humble?
Really not. I once actually got so panicked in the middle of a scene that we were doing that I started to take my bra off by mistake. Like it was not good. This poor kid, he's probably still like traumatized. And I bit a guy. I once bit an actor who was going in. Oh God, it was awful. I was reading in a part that wasn't actually my part. It was like just for the rehearsal. Somebody was off sick, and it was like this restoration farce, and they're always a little bit kind of well, dirty basically. And I really fancied this guy who I won't say who it is because he's on telly now, and he's not a bad looking young man, or no, not so young. On him, and I remember reading this part and going, "Oh my gosh, his character's going to kiss my character! Oh my goodness, this is how we'll fall in love." And then when we got to that bit in the scene, he sort of hesitated, and then I was like, "Oh, I don't want to look like I'm waiting for an actual kiss because we're just in rehearsal, and so he'll guess I fancy him." So I started to say my next line, and then he, for reasons best known to himself, just leapt in and went for it, and I bit him. Like I actually, because I was talking while he went in, and yeah. So yeah, I was like, okay, that's I'm definitely not cut out to be a romantic lead.
We're not going to get a name drop of the actor. No.
It's probably safest not, like
No,
out
okay,
of kindness.
Okay, no worries. Alan Rorison says that was superb. Angela says again, left me wondering what things. Looking forward to what's these what things exactly. Well, the one I seen was later on, so it was a little. It becomes more clear. But yeah, Angela, I think you're going to love them all. Raymond Dito says that is amazing, very moving. Kirsty's a fantastic actress, huge Burniston fan. So my shouts to all the Burniston crew. Troy says you worked in an oil refinery. Did you survive your job? Oil sounds like a dangerous job.
Well, I didn't actually work on the actual refinery bit. It was a very, very strange situation in which I'd been hired as, so I've worked as a copywriter as a sort of day job over the years. So I was hired to write this sort of like help documentation for the maintenance computer software. And I'm saying that slowly because I barely understand any of these words, never mind I can actually write anything that's going to help anybody. So after I did an absolutely horrible job of it, I was living in Vancouver at the time, and the client said, why don't you come and actually be based on site, and you can actually see how this oil refinery works, and you can learn about it, and then you can write properly about it. So yeah, that's what I did. I went to Toledo, Ohio for 3 months, and I had to work in a fire resistant boiler suit and wear steel-toed boots. And yeah, it was a really, and I tell you, see, if you ever want to feel like a supermodel, be one of 3 women working on a site with 797 Midwestern men. They would literally like howl as we walked through, and this was in a boiler suit. So yeah, that made up for the biting actors. I felt a little bit better after that. It was, yeah, a really interesting, and actually it's quite mad. So you know how you're not allowed to use a mobile phone on a petrol station? For similar reasons, you're not allowed to have your personal gun on you while you work in an oil refinery. And every single staff meeting that they had, I think they were like every 2 weeks, so I went to 6 while I was there for 3 months, somebody complained about the fact that they had to put their gun in a locker when they came in to the oil refinery. So it was quite eye-opening.
And how long did that last for?
It was about 3 months that I was actually on site.
That must be quite good in the sense that it would surely be quite a lot of time to write because there's literally nothing else to do.
Pretty much, and it was a brilliant opportunity to just get to see some of those characters in the kind of people that sometimes I guess we see these days through social media. Like I'm certain that the majority of guys I knew in those days, like a lot of them would have voted for Trump. And as much as I obviously don't agree with that in any way, shape, or form, I'm glad that I kind of have a little bit of a personal experience as to how certain opinions take shape and so on. So it was a great experience as a writer. And it was actually while I was working there, I heard the story that became the idea that became Dark of Night eventually. So it was quite a fruitful and very strange 3 months.
Well, let's just go into Dark of Night in a little moment. I just want to give a wee Patreon update. Sandra has upgraded from the Mince and Tatties crew, which is $3 a month, to the Fish Suppers, which is $8 a month. Thank you so much, Sandra. Really appreciate your support. And Raymond has returned. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. Claire, let's talk about this book, because this obviously you said it's your most successful work. So you heard the story from the oil. At what point did you just think that? Did you just put that in your head? This is a good idea for a thing. Is that what happens?
Yeah, pretty much almost immediately. I knew that it was something that I really, really wanted to write about. So I'll tell the story as briefly as I can because it's a brilliant story. Basically, so as I say, there was 3 women on this oil refinery with 797 men. So strangely enough, we all became quite good pals, and so we went for a drink one night, and one of them started telling this story about. So it was her auntie. I think her mum was one of maybe 4 or 5 sisters, and this auntie was the middle of, I think it was 5 sisters, and this was the sort of, I don't know, early 70s or something like that, and she was the only one of the sisters to be unmarried, which I guess in those days she would have been like maybe her mid-late 20s. She'd been a bridesmaid 4 times. Really felt like maybe that had sort of passed her by. I've got a horrible feeling she might have been telling me this story to make me feel better at some point at that age. Anyway, so one day she was working in this a laundrette in Seattle, which is where this woman had originally come from, out in the Pacific Northwest. And this guy came in, and he was absolutely drop dead gorgeous, and he was really charming, and he was really clever. And he asked her out, and I think she said no the first couple of times because she just couldn't believe that this like amazing Prince Charming actually fancied her. And finally she said yes. She was like talked into it. She said yes. They went out for dinner, had this like absolutely perfect, amazing date where, you know, he was a total gentleman, opened the car door, pulled the chair out, asked her all the questions. And she was like, oh, this is it. This is why I have, you know, suffered being single so long. I'm going to get the, you know, the ultimate prize of this like amazing Prince Charming. And, you know, she's planning out their wedding and her, you know, as she's finishing dessert and all the rest of it. Then on the way home, she got hit by like the worst food poisoning she'd ever had in her life. And he barely managed to stop the car before she sort of fell out and like puked everywhere. And of course, you know, you're that way that nobody can help that kind of thing, but it's the last thing you want to be doing on a date with somebody like amazing that you really want to, you know, impress. And so she was like getting back in the car, just absolutely dying. And sure enough, he dropped her off, you know, was very nice to have met you, bye-bye, sped off. She never heard from him again. She was absolutely gutted and, you know, did the whole thing that we all do in those circumstances. You know, should I maybe phone him? Should I like walk past his work and be like, oh, what are you doing here? And, you know, so for years and years, and I think she met her husband not too long after that. But for years and years, it was this like the one that got away, this sort of like a family legend, this guy that she'd screwed it up with by having like dodgy scallops or something.
An inappropriate spew.
Oh, well, precisely. So it was this thing that, you know, she'd always, you know, messed it up with this guy. And then one day, I think this was in the mid-80s. So she was, you know, married for a few years. She was watching telly, watching the news. And there he was on the news getting arrested. It was Ted Bundy.
Wow.
Yep. So of course, as soon as I heard that, I was like, oh my goodness, I have to write this. This is brilliant. But it took me years to figure out exactly what the story was, because it's a bit of, even though it's a brilliant story to tell just like that, but of course,
but it's kind of got a start, a middle, and an end as it is.
Exactly. So yeah, it's fantastic, but of course it just has that sort of like that wow factor at the end once you know who he is. But he was already in prison by then, so I was like, well, that's not a whole film. You know, then it's just about this. So like I was kind of thinking about it for years, and I tried out different versions of what the story might be, and none of them really worked, but I kept coming back to it again and again. And then it was when I had moved back to Glasgow, and I was at a little bit of a loose end because I didn't really work in the film industry here yet. I wasn't sure if that's what I wanted to do. I'd been doing that in Sweden. So I just kind of moved here, and I wasn't quite, you know, as I say, I didn't really grow up here. So I've been this strange, like, undercover immigrant where nobody can tell that I don't like have school friends and I don't know my way around. It's so hard to ask for directions when obviously I've never lost my accent. So talking like this and not knowing how to get to George Square it's an adventure I wouldn't miss. I wouldn't really wet on anybody. So it was a slightly strange like few months sort of wandering around this strange city that it's got a bit of like a mythical status in my family because I'm the eldest, so my younger siblings don't even remember living in Glasgow at all. But of course, there's millions of stories from, you know, our parents and grandparents growing up. So it was really strange now being like, oh, now I live here and now I'm getting to know places that I've been hearing about for years and years. And somehow I used to go out for these really long walks and just kind of explore and get to know places so that I wouldn't have to frighten people by asking for directions with this accent. And it was on one of those walks that I started thinking about this story, and it just suddenly came to me that what was really interesting about it, it wasn't just the like shock factor that, oh my God, that was Ted Bundy. It was the fact that she was gutted he didn't phone. It was the fact that she had gone through a whole dinner, so what, like 2 hours at least, with one of the most evil, depraved people ever to have lived. And she was like, I hope I get a second date. And I thought that's what's so interesting, because like, is he just such an incredible actor that she had no idea who he was, even though she sat across a table with him for such a long time? Or did she suspect, but because she so wanted it to work out and so wanted to, you know, meet somebody and get married and stuff, did she just sort of ignore all any red flags? And as soon as I started thinking down those lines and the fact that it was really about how do you trust somebody that you've just met, and why should you trust somebody, and should you trust them at all, in fact, that was kind of where the actual book started to form in my head. So it's one of the storylines is about, and this isn't really a spoiler, it's quite at the towards the beginning, it's about a woman who has discovered that her husband of 10 years is a serial killer. She was just sort of home one day and got a knock on the door, and it was the FBI there to arrest her husband. So it's a lot about the fact that she's like, but I lived with this man for 10 years. He was my husband. I knew him. We sat, you know, marathon and rubbish telly together. And he was doing this the whole time and I didn't know.
Amazing. Saved by a bad scallop, says Petra. And
Well,
Debbie Harry was in the car with Ted. I've never heard that before.
I think I've read that before. It rings a bell. But yeah, I just remember that was just so fascinating that, although funnily enough, I actually told this story at a book club a couple of years ago, and somebody there that's really, really into, you know, true crime and all of that, she said there's a rumor that he might have tried to poison his victims so that they were already a bit kind of loopy.
Well, that's what I thought. Well, I thought that's where you were going with that, because I was aware of the Ted Bundy story before, but yeah, was it maybe he'd poisoned her or like drugged her in some way?
Mm-hmm.
But then why did she get away? That's the
I
question.
wonder if maybe it just reacted. I wonder if maybe he was the poison was, because I think it was supposed to make them a little bit, you know, sort of sedated and loopy, but for whatever reason it reacted a little bit more projectile for her. And I think I have read about him. He was a bit squeamish. I think quite weirdly, you know, given the violence.
Wow.
But yeah, I think a lot of these guys, they tend to be quite pernickety about, you know, certain things. So I wonder if that was it. Maybe I'm just realizing I should probably put a light on, because I'm just realizing
you're starting
fading
to
into the.
I just noticed when I cut to me, I seem very bright all of a sudden.
Right.
Alan Rorison's heard the Debbie Harry story before. Lou Rogerson, glad to see you're back from your Facebook ban. I hope you last longer than a week this time, Lou. To be fair, Ted Bundy was supposed to be a charmer and very good looking. He was also a sociopath. Suppose he was a skilled liar and manipulator.
Well, yeah, I think that's true, and I think that was actually part of this story, was that, you know, because he was a lawyer, and he, I think he actually ended up representing himself in his own trials, so I think that was it, that he had this sort of, you know, charm, and, you know, would have had a bit of, you know, banter about him and so on. That's one of the things that I think people get really fascinated about him because he wasn't really, you know, what you think of, you know, this, you know, kind of creepy guy that you run away from. And that's one of the things that I think makes him so scary. But then to me, that's one of the most terrifying things, because, you know, I could go on a date with a charming guy tomorrow. How do I know he's not Ted Bundy?
Exactly. And what if people are wanting to read the books? What's the best way to do it?
Probably the easiest way is Amazon. They're all there. So I'm under CS Duffy there. There's a very good reason for that, which is when I very first started writing. It's when I was actually writing that blog that I talked about.
First of all, can I just interrupt you there, because initials are cool if you're going to be an author.
Thank you.
You know, because there's a lot of, you know, a friend of mine, Kevin P. Gilday, the poet, And I think that without that P, I think it would be a different thing. But I think it's important to have initials if you want to be taken seriously as a writer. Sorry, continue.
I think not at all, because I think it does have a little bit more of a sort of literary, pretentious sort of thing going on. However, it is a more practical reason in my case, which is when I first published my first book, I discovered that there was already a Claire Duffy on Amazon, and she writes incest porn, which an elderly relative found and read, thinking it was me.
Oh no.
And I got a very awkward email from my mum saying, could you just make sure that grandma never reads your other books? And I was going, what are you talking about? What other books? I've only got the book and grandma's, she's read it. And she was like, no, your other books. And I did some investigating and I discovered the other books. And I was like, oh, I'll be C.S. Duffy then. I think I'll...
Also, Claire, we had last night, we had Claire Duffin on the show. I know it's a different name, but we had Claire Duffin, who's a music manager and a drummer for a band called Suspire.
Oh,
and
right.
I was when I sent you the flyer, because I was doing that while I was doing the show, and I was just worried that I was going to mix up, because we had Claire Duffin there and Claire Duffy there. So I'm glad that I didn't make the mistake. We've got Nigel says he probably would have made a good politician, dodgy career move to be a mass murderer. I think he was in politics at some point. I think I watched the documentary on Netflix last year, and I think he was involved in politics, or he was friends with politicians or something like that.
Yeah, I think he might have been involved in local politics in some way. He definitely got involved in sort of some campaigns as a lawyer, and I think as a student as well. That rings a vague bell. But yeah, I mean, they say that there's an awful lot of politicians or really successful business people are on that psychopath scale. So I don't know if there's some, they're like a crossroads that they go, well, will I be a millionaire or a murderer? What'll work out best for me?
And I'm sure in some cases both. I'm
Yeah.
sure there's a few of them. Lou Rogers says, moral of the story, be wary of the good-looking charmers. They will kill you and possibly eat you. Correct. That's
Words to live by.
Words to live by. I think what we're going to do is look at the last one we'll watch this evening, because I don't want to give away too much. We want people to watch it in their own time, and I think that people will benefit by watching them all back to back as well. So I don't want to just keep playing them. But we're going to play the third one, which is called You Just Know. Could you just tell us a little bit of background to that one?
Yep. So that one, the actress is called Adiza Shadow, Shardo, apologies. Who I think I spotted in Casualty, I don't know, 6 months ago or something. And you'll kind of see as soon as that she's just got such a kind of like amazing spirit that you just sort of jump on. Amazingly, she's fantastic. And so I wrote, as I say, the three. Quite quickly, sort of one after the other. So I sort of had like the scary one, Kim's one, which was, this possibly psychopathic, woman that wants to eradicate grief from the world, and sort of all what that means. And then this quite, traumatic experience that Kirsty did about somebody actually having an encounter with one of these, we're calling them like organically dead or medically induced zombies.
Things, or you might remember
things. Yeah.
Things from the last one. Things, rather be in the ground than be one of those things, as I think loosely where we ended the last one. So yeah, let's check this out. And once again, leave a comment and let us know what you think of this one.
I'm not good at this sort of thing. Words describing things. I'm a scientist, not bloody Shakespeare or whatever. My sister asked me to make a speech for her wedding, and I said she was trying to make some feminist point. The best man speaks, so I had to as well, which all seems a bit of a carry on to me. But she's my sister. So I stole a speech from a romantic comedy from the 90s with Julia Roberts or someone. Changed a few details and no one even knew. So if I didn't have the words to express my baby sister being a wee pet and I'm happy that she's happy and all that, I'm hardly going to be able to describe this, am I? I was there when he flatlined. I was with an elderly lady, broken femur. We were trying to stabilize her for the theatre. But I glanced over at one point and there's a vibe sometimes. I think I've made it quite clear I'm not very imaginative. My sister, she's the arty one, plays the cello. But sometimes a patient comes in and their vital signs are fine. Not great maybe, but not hopeless. And yet it is hopeless. You just know. It's as though there's a grim reaper's right there in the room with you, looking over your shoulder, waiting his turn. You carry on with your job at the best of your ability. Of course you can. But deep down, it was a young guy, 19 or something. I'd seen him when he first came in when I was waiting on the old lady. No chance. Honest to God, if I could eradicate motorbikes off the face of the earth. They shocked him twice, but I was called away after. It was mad tonight. One of those shifts where you just feel so inadequate. I always imagined it would feel powerful being a doctor. You get told that as a kid, don't you? That hospitals are where people go to get fixed. The mummy doesn't feel well, but the doctor will make it all better. You never really think about when they can't. Which is absurd, because it's not as though they fixed my mum. You'd think the penny might have dropped then. Well, not quite as clever as I think I am. So not artistic and clever. I mean, wow, what is the point in me? I went to church as a kid. My mum was... It's just something we did on a Sunday. But after she... Well, I just never went back, and I never really thought about it one way or another for years. But it is a miracle. I mean, literally, right? Coming back from the dead, it's kind of the whole thing. He was sitting up in the cubicle when I walked by later, the 19-year-old who died. Parents were on either side of him, holding his hand like they would never let go. And he was just talking. That was the maddest bit. Chatting away. He told them about the accident and asked if his bike was a write-off. His dad offered to get him a new bike, which made me want to slightly wring the dad's neck in, but still, he was talking. He should never have said another word at all. But yeah, he did.
You call that radio?
You call that radio?
What about the people who hate it on me?
Right, and then I see the disinfectant that knocks it out in a minute.
That's mad, isn't it?
Is this a Netflix thing?
It's actually a podcast.
What the fuck's a podcast?
You know, it's kind of like a radio show.
Oh, that! Radio!
Yeah.
Just popped in there. And is there a way we can do something like that?
I couldn't help it.
By injection inside or
Yeah, I think so, because I think just paint in general, because I think like my poem is in my painting.
No, cut. It should call that radio. We're live with Claire Duffy. And yeah, it's fascinating just watching the story unfold. And I've put in the comments the YouTube link so that after the show you can enjoy the rest of it. So there is another 3 episodes that you haven't seen tonight, and there's going to be another 10. So are you planning on releasing them like just in a big winner, or are you just going to try and drip it out?
I think I'm going to see, because some of them, because they're from other filmmakers, it's going to depend slightly on when I get them. But I think, yeah, I'll try and kind of drip them out every maybe couple of days or something. And then, because I've kind of got this mad concept that I'm just seeing how it's going to work, where, we pass it on. Hopefully this chain will start to sort of emerge, but it's a little bit difficult, obviously, because the whole point is I can't control it.
Are you going to come back? Are you going to
exciting.
come back and control it at some point?
Do you know what? Maybe is the short answer. I just really want to see what the possibilities and what can happen. So I want to see these next years. I've spoken to a few just really, really amazing directors and writers that have all said, oh, yes, amazing. I'm going to do an episode. So I'm going to get all of those out. And then, yeah, my idea is that hopefully gradually we'll start to sort of mold it into a bit more of a traditional series with like storylines that will start to sort of come off each other, and I'll say, right, you're doing that storyline and you've got 5 episodes to work with these characters and tell that. But I don't really know exactly at how soon that will happen, or if it'll be just a while of just sort of building up this sort of world building that we're doing at the moment. But then for me, that's part of the fun of it. I don't know exactly how it's going to I don't know, develop, I guess, but it's quite fun just sort of sitting watching and finding out.
And is it true that it's all female filmmakers you're passing it on to?
Yeah. So that was a part of this whole idea I was talking about before, that it was all about not waiting for like approval or permission or anything like that. And that is definitely these gatekeepers that we've been talking about. And again, it's like nobody's been evil. Nobody's trying to keep female filmmakers out, but there's just no question. You can see it in the patterns of who's writing and directing the stuff that gets on screen, that men, and particularly white men, are just being prioritized. And I don't think people are really wanting to do that, but they are. And so that was, there's an awful lot of, there'll be like flurries of chat about that on Twitter, and people will get all up in arms and indignant and, oh, we need to get more, more opportunities for women. And I'm like, great, fantastic. But I really wanted to, like, rather than just keep on arguing this point that we should, do something that just proved what women can do when there's nobody stopping us. So the way that it works is the people that we nominate, I'm calling them the showrunners. So they're like the sort of the producer in charge of each scene. If they want to cast a guy, or if they even want to ask one to write or direct, they're more than welcome to. So it's not about excluding men altogether. It's just that it will only be if they're invited in by women. So it's not, I wouldn't want to necessarily work like that on every single project, but I just thought it'd be a really interesting way of just totally flipping that, the normal way of working, which is usually there's a majority of men on each production, and then hopefully, women can kind of, slip in and take whatever little opportunities are left over. So on this, it's the other way around. So the only way a guy can get involved is if he is invited in by a female filmmaker. And it's been so much fun, because it's just been such a fun sort of like community that we're already starting to build amongst. Because the other thing is, as female filmmakers, because as I'm saying, there tends to be like, if there's a woman writer, there'll be a male director, or vice versa. So you get to meet these amazing women all the time, and then you never get to work with them because there's just never enough of us on a given production. So this is our opportunity to all kind of get to work together and sort of create this really exciting, already so far, like community, of female filmmakers that are telling a very weird and dark and disturbing story about zombies in Glasgow.
Have you worked with Hannah Curry yet?
No, I don't think so. I don't think I'm going to track her down.
You need to get Hannah Curry. She's there's a really good, she's been on You Call That Radio before with as a guest on her audio podcast, and also on her TV podcast about a month ago or something. But she's an excellent filmmaker, and I'm sure this sounds right up her street. So brilliant. Definitely, she's one to definitely try and track down, and she's easy enough to track down as well. So she also does she's one of our hosts on the pub quiz that we do every month. We haven't done one this month because last month's pub quiz ended in controversy.
Oh,
we can't go anymore. We can't go more into that, but it's been deleted. We will make it right with a pub quiz in the future, but it got a bit mad. People take pub quizzes very seriously, and quite rightly. I'm one of them.
Me too. I love a pub quiz. I'm very competitive.
Sometimes people let their emotions get the better of them, and I'm included in that, and I apologise for that.
Me too.
We'll make it right. We'll make it right. So with regards to, let's keep because last night, as you know, we had That's What She Said, but it was about women's experiences in the music industry in Scotland and also Iran as well, because Farzan was on the show as well. And then tomorrow we're doing the same thing again. I think there's a lot of the similarities that run through it. I mean, it's pretty much the same problems happening in both worlds. So if there's any females out there, you know, what advice would you give them if they're wanting to get involved in film or TV?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think it would really just be to get involved and don't take no for an answer. I think that I think when any of us, you know, and men as well, when you're first starting out in any creative industry, it can be so difficult. You know, when you're getting rejections, to to have that confidence in yourself that you just need to kind of keep on going. And I think that particularly women, we tend to, you're maybe looking for or hoping for a bit of outside validation that yes, you're talented. We need your stories. We want you in the industry. It can be really, really difficult to find that. And so I think we lose an awful lot of amazing talent, and no doubt, you know, male talent as well, because of that, because, you know, it's wildly competitive, as it should be, and it's subjective. So you can almost never, you know, objectively say, yes, I am good. Yes, I'm good enough. So all I would say is if you've got stories in you and you've got films or, you know, teleseries or whatever it is in you, then just like I'm telling you right now that you are good enough and I want to see it. And so just keep on going. If you're a female filmmaker, you know, get in touch with me on Twitter, do an end series, an episode of your own, show us what you can do, and then that's your first thing done, and then, you know, the sky's the limit from there.
And with sort of put it sort of a bit broader as well to include males or anyone else with writing. So say for example, someone thinks they've got a good idea. What's the next stage?
Right. So just with an idea. So would they have done any kind of like training or
No.
or they just
let's talk about this is for the people out there who just I've always fancied being a writer, but they've just not done it. They stumble probably confidence, and they're just not doing anything about it. How do they get out of that, you know, that I'm not good enough, or how do they get to a point where they're ready to share their work, or what can they do?
Okay, well, I mean, the main, like the short answer and the slightly probably boring answer is write it. Just write it. Like, I think just about every writer, myself included, has, you know, wandered around for years and years with stories in our head that sitting down in front of a blank page and putting, you know, whether it's fingers to keyboard or pen to paper or whatever it is just the most terrifying, horrible thing ever. And also just the transferring this amazing thing in your imagination, because of course you imagine it, you know, absolutely brilliant and fully realized, and then you start to actually write it and immediately it's like, oh, this is rubbish. So the first thing is start to write it, get it down, scribble it out, you know, or dictate notes to yourself, you know, whatever it is, just start to get it out your head. And then also, I think it's Oscar Wilde that said the first draft of everything is shit. And just know that it is. Is
that the same as the kill your darlings quote?
Yeah, a little bit. It's around that same kind of idea that, like, I remember actually, I feel like I was talking about this with somebody the other day. When I was at film school, I remember them telling us, oh, the first 10 scripts you write will be absolutely rubbish before you write the good one. And I remember sitting there going, oh, I'll just write the good one first. Why would I do that? But you know, you have to, is that whole, you know, the 10,000 hour theory. You just have to write and write and write, read and read and read, watch everything if it's, you know, screen that you want to write for. And yeah, just write, like, tell yourself you're going to write every single day, even for, like, you know, 10 minutes before you go off to work or before you fall asleep, or, you know, whatever works for you. Just write and write and write. Understand that it will be rubbish to start with, and just know that that's part of the process. It doesn't mean it'll always be rubbish. There's another quote, I can't remember who said it, but it was something like, you can't edit a blank page. And that's so true. As soon as you get something on the page, you can start to edit it and you can start to make it a little bit better. And then I would also say is send it to people really early on. An awful lot of writers that are just starting out tend to be really protective and tend to keep it to themselves for a really long time, which, you know, I totally understand, because there's nothing more terrifying than sending your writing out for the first time and waiting to hear what somebody thinks of it. Like, it is just, it's the stuff of nightmares, especially if they never get back to you, and then you're left always going, Did you hate it? Do you never want to speak to me again? Like, it's just awful. But you just have to grit your teeth and do that, because the more you do it, and don't just send it to friends as well, like send it to some pals, send it to writing groups, send it to, there's some people that do it for a living. You can pay them 50 quid and they'll read, whatever your work in progress is. The more that you send it out and the more you get feedback, the more you'll start to understand what it is you're really saying as a writer. Like, you don't always know when it's just in your head. Because sometimes people will give you feedback and it's useless. They're just telling you how they would write it and it's no good to you at all. But you need to get a lot of feedback to start to understand that. And then that's when you get to that, like, that 10th draft, that's something that's really, really good. So I guess, the short answer is write loads, read loads, watch loads, and then send it out way earlier than you want to.
Yeah, because I suppose if you're, it's a good point as well, because if you're spending all that time, what you think is almost a finished thing, so you're just hoping that people are just going to say, "Oh, that's great," but they actually say, "No, that's really bad. You've got lots of stuff to do." Then that's going to be heartbreaking, and you've got a lot of work to be done. You just got to bin it all. Well, if you catch it earlier on, you can maybe be aware of things that you're doing wrong.
Exactly.
What's the kind of what's the harshest criticism you've had, and what's the best feedback you've had?
Oh my goodness. Oh, I'd have to think about that. I've had a lot of harsh criticism. Everybody does. And I think it's one of the best things that you can get in a strange way. Like, when I was at film school, it was a really good baptism by fire in a way, because we wrote, I think it was 10 pages of a screenplay every week, and then we workshopped it. So every single week you put 10 pages out to your whole class and everyone would give feedback on it. So it was a really, really good way of just getting used to hearing what people think. There's times that someone will say something and you're going, that's got nothing to do with what I'm writing. But the only way you can kind of learn to recognize that is to keep on hearing it. I'm trying to think of a really specific heartbreaking. I mean, I've got a couple of 1-star reviews on Amazon. You can go and read them. Some of them are quite comical. I did get a brilliant comment on, so that wasn't actually fiction. I wrote very briefly a kind of like Sex and the City type column about dating in Stockholm. Swedish men, bless them, they're very beautiful, but they're very, very strange. And so I wrote this like mad, column about trying to figure them out. And I had this very angry guy get in touch and tell me that I was not Carrie Bradshaw, and he was absolutely disgusted that I ever thought that I could be. So that was quite amusing. And the best, I've just had so many, especially Dark of Night. I've had some absolutely brilliant reviews and messages from people that they've actually emailed me to say that, I think actually one of my favorite reactions that I've got a few times is someone saying that they sat up to like 2:00 because they just couldn't stop reading, that they were like, oh, I'll just read a few pages. And then that was them like all night, because they were just like, oh, what's going to happen? And then, because there's Dark of Night's it's over 5 books. And each of them ends sort of on a cliffhanger. And I've had people saying they've read to 2:00 and then it's ended, and then they've bought the next one on their Kindle like immediately and kept going. And that to me is just the most exciting thing to ever hear. It's brilliant.
Well, I suppose that's that is an amazing thing. And I think that was a really good point that deserves to be underlined. This is that by putting your work out to more people and getting more and more feedback, you can tell the difference between what is just mean people, because there's lots of idiots out there that just want to be mean, and they don't actually know what that you're trying to do. So, but by getting lots of feedback, you're going to tell what's good feedback, who's just been mean for the sake of being mean, who's giving you real advice, and who's just also just being a friend by telling you it's good when it's not good. And I suppose just by having that experience of telling, because I remember SoundCloud used to be quite a good platform for that. When we would upload our demos, in MySpace days, it was everyone would go, great song, check out my song. It would be the kind of thing, and that's not very helpful. But when people are actually giving you feedback, like, I'd put the vocals up more. I would do it with this. It's really good, but I would just change that. You shouldn't be offended by it. And you're quite right to just ignore this advice as well. I do. I ignore a lot of advice. But sometimes sometimes someone says something that you just think about and you sleep on it and you go, I think they might be right. I think they might have nailed that.
Exactly. And I think that's it, that you start to learn when a piece of feedback like resonates with you. I think that's the best way I can put it. When you just it's almost, you almost recognize it, like it's almost familiar. Like, of course, that's exactly what I've been thinking. It
That's what
could
your
be.
self-doubt was saying, because sometimes it's hard to recognize yourself, because sometimes it's just your brain fucking with you and saying that you're shite and something's wrong. But it's maybe you're just recognizing there is something wrong with this. So when someone says it, you're like, okay, it's not shite, it's just that bit needs changed or worked upon.
Exactly. And sometimes actually the feedback then leads you to, make the bit that's so much like sometimes it's, they'll say to you, oh, I thought that's what I had written. It's, but they'd sort of got it from what you'd written, but it's not really on the page yet. Because I think that's, particularly as a writer, an awful lot of the journey of writing something, it's not actually necessarily making it better or different than what you first thought. Sometimes it is, depending on the story, but an awful lot of each of the drafts, it's more getting it closer to what is in your head in the first place. And I think the more you learn to trust that what's in your head is what you want to write, then the more you start to recognize the feedback that pushes you in that direction. Because there's some really well-meaning people that are just, they're not just being an arsehole by saying, be criticizing. They're maybe telling you how they would write it. And that's like, well, that's fine and good, but I'm writing it. And I think that's it. The more confidence you get in, what, the perfect draft, it's in my head. It's there already. I just need to get it from here onto the page or the screen. And each of the drafts is getting me closer to what that is. Then all the feedback, it starts to become into context, if that makes sense. Because you almost, you recognize it or not.
And so obviously the answer that you gave initially is the best advice is to write. If you want to be a writer, you need to write. You just write, and the more you write, the better you're going to get at it. And I would imagine right now, I mean, you've wrote loads now, so although you'll have your tricky moments, it must just be you'll be able to do a lot in a day if you're in the zone.
Yeah, most of the time. I always say there's no motivator like paying your bills by writing. That was probably the biggest transition for me, is when I got to a point that I don't really have another day job anymore. So when people are like, oh, do you sit around and wait for the muse? And I'm like, no, because the gas man would be like knocking on my door. There's no time to sit around and wait for the muse. But then even having said that, there's days when it's going to flow and I keep going for hours and hours and hours and it's all pouring out and it's amazing. And then I'll have 2 days that it's like getting blood from a stone. But that's also, I think, a large part of experience. I mean, I've been doing this for nearly 20 years now. So now I trust that the flowy days, as it were, will come back. And sometimes you just need to battle through a day where it's just like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? I've written like 5 sentences and they're all rubbish. It'll be better tomorrow. Just keep going, keep battling through. And you start to recognize as well, there's different points in the draft that tend to slow down. Like the beginning is always like, oh, it's amazing. Like we're off, you're setting up all the mysteries and introducing the characters and it's great. And so then you'll just like bash through words and pages, and then the end tends to go really fast as well, because you're like, oh, and then the killer comes and then the police come and it's a chase and it's like, and you're right into it yourself. But then there's like the middle where you're like making all the clues work and all of the twisty bits and stuff, and I just know I can't rush through that. It has to take the time that it's going to take, and it's pretty painful.
A big part of writing though is just thinking about writing. So if you're having one of those days, maybe you're aware yourself that you've hit an almost brick wall, and that's maybe, rather than just rush through it, you need to figure stuff out, or it's going to just ruin the whole flow of the book.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I think that's actually another thing that experience helps a lot to recognize, how I always think writing, it's a bit like an iceberg. And the amount that you're actually sitting typing words into a final draft is a little bit of the iceberg, on top of the water. And the amount that you are daydreaming and thinking and reading and researching and scribbling, mind maps and doing all manner of other things that don't feel like writing, that can make you feel like you've been skiving off if you've just been sitting scribbling, or like I quite often, I'll go walking up a hill and like my brain's sort of going the whole time. But then I'll get to the end of the day and I'll think, did I go a hill walk today for fun, or was I actually doing a day's work inside my head? I'm not sure, but I now know at this point that I need days like that, and it's part of the process, and I just have to try not feel like I'm skiving off too much when I know that my brain sort of sometimes it needs to work in the background. Sometimes I think your creative brain works best in the background. So yeah, give yourself something else to do and let it do its thing.
Absolutely, great advice. And I think there's actually some really strong science on that if you give humans a task, and any kind of task, but mostly creative, but also works for other things, and you get to do something else for a couple of minutes and then come back to it. Obviously, you have those days where you just actually don't come back for a couple of hours. That's not what we're talking about here.
Yep.
But actually just for a few minutes, just maybe just going away, maybe cooking something, maybe just thinking about something else just for a second. You come back and then everything falls into place. Mary Phillips says, great advice. Nigel Mitchell says, pitch the idea to a friend and keep going. Everyone has a novel inside them. I do believe that everyone's got a story to tell.
I think so too, and I think that's a great advice as well. That was I think it's in a I think it might be Save the Cat, which is quite a famous screenwriting book. Which is, if you want to be a screenwriter, I recommend. That's a really it's a really handy way just to kind of get you into the nuts and bolts of structuring a screenplay. And that's one of the things that he says is, if you've got an idea for a film and it works as well for a book or a series or whatever, tell people, tell friends, tell the taxi driver, tell randoms in the street, and you'll be able to tell right away if people go, oh, what happens next? Or, oh, well, what about this character or whatever? Or if they just go, oh, that sounds very good. Because I think, and actually it's kind of going back to what we were saying about feedback as well, in some ways for me at this point, the actual words of feedback that people give me are, sometimes it's really helpful depending on what it is. But sometimes it's just the sheer fact that reading what I've written has given them some ideas. Even if I don't agree with the ideas, I know that it's made them think. And so then I'm like, well, then it's working. Then it's doing something. I always think the absolute worst actually feedback, which I should have thought of, it's a better answer than I thought of before, worse than even a 1-star review, is if someone goes, oh, good. Because that's like, that's, they're all very good. Oh, well done. That's politeness.
The musical equivalents in a pub not really annoying you. They aren't really liking you, but I would rather have a terrible. I'd rather be booed off stage, and I have been booed off stage, and at least you get an anecdote out of that rather than sort of a lukewarm reception. And also 1-star reviews, I think, as well. That says a lot more about the person that wrote the 1-star review, in my opinion. People that dislike a YouTube video or go out their way to give someone a 1-star review, that says something about that person. And also, to me, that I would just say, well, I wouldn't worry about that person, because that person's obviously not very happy in life, if that's what they're spending their evening doing. And don't worry about that. They'll never get what I'm trying to do. But I suppose a 3-star is a wee bit like, oh no, well, maybe I wasn't good enough. Well, a 1-star, you can go, that person's just never going to get me.
Yeah. Oh, I completely agree. Actually, yeah, probably those middling ones. Quite enjoyed this. Is like, oh, that hurts. Oh, I felt that deep. Whereas, because also a 1-star, I think you're completely right that often it is people that just need to vent their anger, and if they're going to put it on my book, that's fine. But also, see, I would almost rather somebody hated the book with the passion of 1,000 suns and got got really angry about it, and because again, then I've sparked something in them that is almost a compliment as much as somebody who really, really loved it. Like, one of the examples that I often use is the Outlander books. I read them all years ago, and I sort of love them and I sort of hate them. I hate so much that happens in them. And I won't start because, again, we'll be here all night. I could sit going, and then this happens, and then that shouldn't happen. And I get like really, I say it was like 5 years ago I read the last one, and I still get angry about some of the things that happens. But in so many ways that if I was that author, I would take that as a massive compliment, because, she's obviously sparked some real passion in me. And yeah, I would love somebody to hate my books as much as I kind of hate Outlander.
Well, I was an extra in Outlander,
Were
and it was
you?
freezing. It was freezing, absolutely freezing all day, just freezing. And obviously, it's, if anyone doesn't know Outlander, it's set in the time where they didn't have shoes or whatever, so you're kind of just in a freezing Ayrshire beach all day. And I don't even know if I'm in it, but I just did the same thing over and over again. And so that's all I know about Outlander. One of my friends
It's cold.
works. Well, it's a cold show. Shout outs to, I know my friend, he works in Outlander. No offense, Outlander, but it was cold.
Yeah, no, not at all. And actually,
It
and
was
the
cold.
series is really good. And I say it's not even really a criticism. It's like it's that passion of going, that shouldn't have happened to this character. And see if you care about something, even if it's in a sort of negative way. I think that's a brilliant thing. Than
Absolutely.
there's loads of things out. There's loads of books I've read and gone, I didn't really like that, but I couldn't even tell you right now what they are.
Art
And
is
yeah,
about creating a reaction. So one way or
exactly.
the other, it's like the worst film I ever seen was Robert De Niro, Dirty Grandpa. I cancelled my Cineworld account after it. I couldn't handle it. I had to walk out towards the end. It got more and more ridiculous. And that film stuck with me to this day. And there's loads of other, there's loads of mediocre films I wouldn't even know what they're called. But Dirty Grandpa,
Exactly.
Robert De Niro, why did you do it? Why did De Niro do that? He doesn't need the money, surely. I don't get it. It upsets me. Sorry, I don't want to end this in a negative thing. I'm going to read some comments out and we're going to wrap things up. We've got Paul, who's he said that, so the house, that, just in case you're interested, that's called Trianon. I don't know if I had that name in the day, but Paul on Twitch has posted a link to it, and it is that one.
Cool.
So if you want to do that, Mary Phillips is a huge Outlander fan. Well, good. I'm glad you enjoy it.
I'll say so am I, kind of.
Petra, it'd be fun to do writing, acting, round robin thing, and you call that radio. I bet loads of folk would get involved. I'm totally up for that, Petra. We were going to do, one of the things when lockdown began was I was going to try and do like a kind of writing group thing of some sort as well as this. But this is just kind of taking up so much of my time that I've not been able to do it. But it's actually a really good idea if we could just get a few writers and maybe just, share their work. And I think it'd be quite good because we've got a nice audience of people here that wouldn't be too mean, and I'm sure would give good feedback. So that's a good idea. And Mary Folks also missed the beginning, but she's tuned in halfway. Sounds really interesting what she's heard so far. You can find the rest of this on youtube.com/you call that radio. It'll be live at the end of the show, Mary, as you already know. Jerry O'Donnell was loving the idea of the end series. It is a great idea. Alan Rory says, I've never seen Bad Grandpa and I never want to either. Spare yourself is my advice. So with Claire, one more time, just to promote, what have you got out there? How can people read and see more of your work?
Oh, right. Well, as we've been talking about, the end is probably the main thing that I am really excited about at the moment. So you can find that, on YouTube. There's the link that you put up. Thank you very much. Or you can follow us on Twitter. It's The End, the series. I've not set up a Facebook page yet. I might get around to that. And then I've also got my books, C.S. Duffy, on Amazon or any bookshops can order them in for you if you prefer to go through bookshops. They don't tend to be on the shelves, but you can find them that way. And a few other things that are in development that I'm not allowed to say anything about just yet, but fingers crossed there'll be a few announcements in the next few months.
And what about Instagram? I think the end might work quite well on Instagram. Is that on?
Actually, so far I've just put it up on my own my IGTV, which is also CS Duffy Writer, which is I'm on that Twitter and Facebook as well. But that's it. I think at this sort of early stage, as I say, I'm kind of waiting for all these other episodes to come in, and I'm also doing a little bit of like trial and error and trying to work out where are people really wanting to watch stuff, where is the audience for it, and so on. So I think I'm going to start just putting up episodes in like different places and just seeing where the right people find them. So they could be popping up.
There's just so many. That we're going to look back at this time of the internet and just be like, what were we thinking? It just seems like something's wrong. We've got all these different things, replying to all these different messages and different platforms. It feels like, I think we can do better as a species in general, but also in the world of social media, because where is everyone? Right now we're on Facebook, Twitch and YouTube. And, you know, I've not even bothered with an Instagram account because I just was like, I can just about
it gets
do with
too
3.
much.
It's too much. But I just thought I quite like the idea of, I don't want to put it on your plate because I think just sticking to one's good because it will keep your views up if you stick to YouTube. But I just quite like the idea of stumbling across that on Instagram, and for the first, 10 or 20 seconds, I'm sure some people for the full thing thinking it's actually, someone in real life Instagram that they've just stumbled across, So amazing. What I'm going to do, Claire, is thank you so much for your time today. It's been absolutely brilliant talking to you.
Oh, not at all. Thank you for having me.
I look forward to the rest of the series. I'll link you up to Hannah Curry, who's an amazing filmmaker from Glasgow. And I'm going to end with a wee video that we just uploaded. We did a show on Saturday night. It was we did it live from an actual venue. Well, it's a warehouse that's been turned into a venue for no audiences. So it kind of looked like a TV show. A lot of work went onto this. We deleted it from the internet as soon as it happened, which pissed people off because they're like, why? Because we don't know what it was expensive to run, and we don't know what we're going to do with the content. But everyone seemed to enjoy it. I've just before we came on air, I uploaded one video from the All Day Festival, and I put a wee link in it. I want everyone to share this, please, if you can. And every day at 3:00 we'll drip feed a new video from the day. It was a wonderful day. And thank you to everyone who donated or became a patron, because with your support, we can do it again and hopefully do one every month, because it felt like, for me, to watch some live music again was amazing. And even though there was no audience in the real world at the gig, there was some staff participation and there was just loads of people online having a great time. So hopefully we can recreate that with your help. Finally, as well, I just want to give a shout out to Lynn McDonald, who will be on the show on Thursday. Absolute legend from the Soundhouse era, really important in the techno scene, an events organizer, and also in politics these days. So check out Lynn on Thursday. She's got a lot of wisdom to share. And of course, tomorrow night, it's part 2 of That's What She Said. Becky Wallace will be hosting with a plethora of amazing promoters, producers, managers, singers, songwriters, and there'll be live performances too. It's going to be a great show. So thank you very much, Claire. Really appreciate you taking the time. We're going to end with a wee tune from Saturday. It was Bomb Scare who played a phenomenal set. This was the first song of their headline set, and it's called Catastrophuck. Thank you very much. Check out The End. Powered by our patrons. We are live, as you call that, radio TV, live from Capture Watts. Let's make some noise for the crew. Let's make some noise. You're going to make noise for yourself because there's no audience. Make some noise for Bomb Scare. It's an absolute pleasure. He's up for a gig. Yes. I hope you're all up for a gig. Ladies and gentlemen, round of applause in the comments. Hit the share button and welcome our headliner tonight. You call that radio TV, live from Capture Watts. It's Bomb Scare.
You call that radio?
Sometimes I get the feeling, that I shouldn't be thinking. Then I get to drinking, I get to thinking that I ought to be drinking. Tell me, Lord, 'cause I don't know, where did all that money go? Am I rich or am I poor? Thought I had money, but I'm not so sure. These days to get ahead, bet on the wheel, put it all on red. Out with a bang or a whimper instead, and if you call that living, then I'd rather be dead. The system's a mess, it's come unstuck. Everybody's out of luck. Dead on the walls, 'cause we must, to escape this catastrophe. The system's a mess, it's come unstuck. Everybody's a sitting duck. We need some balls and a ton of luck to escape this catastrophe. Sit back, try to relax, light up a smoke, and don't think of the facts of the future stack. Nothing compares and nothing attracts. You live your day every day, and the world won't shine like the good times stay. And the bill comes and there'll be help to pay, but the dealers won't deal and the greedy won't pay. These days to get ahead, bet on the wheel, put it all on red. Out with a bang or a whimper instead, and if you call that living, then I'd rather be dead. System's a mess, it's come unstuck. Everybody's out of luck. Turn on the walls, 'cause we must, to escape this catastrophe. System's a mess, it's come unstuck. Everybody's a sitting duck. We need some roads and a ton of luck to escape this catastrophe. Sometimes you get the feeling, I get the feeling that I shouldn't be thinking. Then I get to thinking, I get to thinking that I ought to be drinking. Tell me, Lord, 'cause I don't know, where did all that money go? Am I rich or am I poor? Thought I had money, but I'm not so sure. These days to get ahead, bet on the wheel, put it all on red. Out with a bang or a whimper instead, and if you call that living, then I'd rather be dead. System's a mess, it's come unstuck. Everybody's out of luck. Tear on the walls, 'cause we must, to escape this catastrophe. System's a mess, it's come unstuck. Everybody's a sitting duck. Each on balls and a ton of luck to escape this catastrophe.
I got you. Ready? Yeah, here you go. 1, 2. 1, 2, 1, 2. Yo, this is Charlie Tuna from Jurassic 5 live and direct here in Glasgow, Scotland, and you call that radio?
Upon you, we are here to tell the people that we hear you. One God will not allow us as people of conscience to lose our morale. We see the crimes of this government, how they support every dictator and criminal on this earth.